Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Bull. So in this episode, it deals with this guy named Andrew Withrow, who kind of, business mogul, he kind of basically builds stuff. And basically, a sky bridge he built ended up collapsing, breaking, and ended up killing 15 people. An interesting side note, kind of want to go ahead and get it out there, because I kept wondering, I was like, why does that feel like I've seen this actor? I've probably seen him in other stuff, but the first thing that popped in my mind, I realized what it was, Wesley from the Netflix show Daredevil. It's like, oh yeah, that's who he was. Also, I can only assume that's his natural accent. Since like he's talking with one in this episode, I was like, he didn't have one in Daredevil, so I can only assume it's his natural accent, because it's like, I don't think they normally would make someone put on an accent for something. So it's probably just his natural accent. But nevertheless, it's a very interesting case because obviously, Bull initially brings it up as like, this dude's a sociopath. The fact is, the way he talks and the way like the micro like expressions in his face, that basically it takes him a little while to kind of like, it's almost like he has to think about how he's supposed to act. That basically he has no empathy, that he really doesn't care about the fact is that he killed all these people. For him, everything's kind of like a very calculated move. It's kind of a big thing behind the whole case. One calculated move on his part was like, oh yeah, my mom's in the hospital, so can I get some time away from this? Give us at least 24 hours. They ended up getting 48. Basically, in that time, he got Diana Lindsay. I couldn't remember her name. I'm glad they brought it up in this episode. Obviously, they would, since it's her. But she's the lawyer Bull crossed paths with back in the Callisto episode. Obviously, her and Bull actually have a past. So it's like, obviously, he did that because it's like, oh, she can be his weakness. It's like she's the perfect weapon against Bull, because Bull kind of isn't 100% on his game when it comes to her. Which, interestingly enough, he kind of is and he kind of isn't, because it's like they have this like back and forth between each other. Because it seems like they want to know. It's something that came up in the episode. It's like, what is this between us? Is it something? Is it not? But it's kind of like, at the same time, it's like they're so used to their game of back and forth. It seems like there are moments where you do see them kind of like wondering, is this something? Is it not? Should we act upon it? But it also seems like maybe works interfering. Like, it seems like she uses it as an excuse. At the same time, it seems like Bull uses it as an excuse. Like, we know she's like the one person that Bull's gone up against in the past that he's kind of lost to. Like, even aside from the whole Callisto situation. Well, he had previously gone up against her in Callisto, but obviously this time within the confines of the series, the episode we saw, he took her down. So. But what makes her a good adversary is the fact that she knows his tactics, especially because she went up against him, obviously, within the confines of the series. So, obviously, she went up against him under different... Well, I don't know if he was working with the whole tact system and the team that he's working with now when he originally went up against her, not prior to, like, the Callisto episode. So, obviously, that's a little... No, because it seems like... I remember them having like, oh, so she's the one person that's ever beat you. So, they weren't around. So, it's probably definitely during his prosecuting... days. Was he a prosecutor? Well, his lawyer days, just put it as that, because I don't know if he ever outright said whether he was a lawyer or prosecutor. I mean, whether he was a prosecutor or defense lawyer, but nevertheless, so it was definitely before then. So, but she took the opportunity, since she lost to them last time, now she's taking this opportunity to be like, okay, now I know what you're up to. She even took out, like, she ended up offering all 12 of the mirror jurors, optional. It's something to kind of basically get them out of their granted. Later on in the episode, they kind of get them replaced. And then there's the back and forth between striking jurors. It's like, oh yeah, this juror was heard bad mouthing my client, the defendant, and it's like, oh, this juror has been smoking weed like every day since coming, like just back and forth like that. Even to the point where the judge is like, okay, I hope this is the last one, so we can get on with this trial. I'm tired of having to come into my room just to strike jurors for you. It's like, I hope this is done. I hope there's no more striking. It's another situation where they're at a disadvantage on multiple levels. At first, it's because it's the attorney, I think the assistant attorney general who's handling this case. And basically, he kind of did something without their permission. He brought them in because he wasn't 100% sure if he'd win this case or not. But he ended up doing something on his own, and that's selecting the jury. So it kind of already put them at a disadvantage, because it's like, they didn't have time to really assess the jury and because obviously he had his own preconceived notions like, oh, these people would be perfect. That's why he was okay with doing it. But it's like, he should have brought Bull in. But he didn't. So like I said, each case is always, that's something you always see in the running themes of the episode. Things have to be changed up because it can always be it's always interesting when things don't always go 100% according to plan of like, oh, they work things out this way, but then they find out things are completely different. You get what I mean. Another interesting thing that, before I kind of get back to the case, another interesting thing that popped up in this episode is like, well, it kind of coincides, is that Andrew owns the building that they work out of, the whole tax situation works out of, and he ended up turning off the power to the building just to kind of spite them and make things harder for him. So they basically had to work out of Bull's place, and Marissa, Cable, and Chunk there, which is like Cable being like, whoa, we're working at your place. They go in there, as you expect, not a lot of furniture. They're like, oh wow, this is there's just not a lot, except for like apparently he has a climbing wall. I guess that's his way of relaxing. Granted, we only saw that one room. We didn't really get to see the rest of his apartment. So, but a thing that ends up coming up in the case is basically there's a guy, his name is Sean. He was the one that kind of helped with the design and everything. At first he didn't want to say anything because basically he was paid off to keep his mouth shut. But for him, he's been having nightmares. Like, from what I could tell, it seems like it's been like a year. Because at first I was thinking like, oh, this is relatively soon after all those people died. But it's like, no, because Sean brought up the fact is that over that year, he got divorced just because he just couldn't keep his life under control, just because every time he closed his eyes, he kept seeing those 15 people who had died because they had saw their bodies carried away. And, in some way he felt responsible for it because it was like his design and everything. But he had warned Andrew multiple times about it. The fact is that he had actually warned him twice. I actually had him face to face with him being like, you shouldn't do that. Like, there's cheap materials here. And it could end up costing some people their lives. But, like I said, Sean was paid to keep his mouth shut. But it's like he wanted to do the right thing, and he did. But sadly, we find him later on in the episode dead. Which Bull doesn't really believe that's that case, because he's like, nah, there's got to be more to this, because it's like Sean felt relieved because he had felt so much guilt, and now he was kind of able to kind of give some kind of justice by confessing, being like, oh yeah, these people were behind it. But with him dying, basically his record, he had to be stripped, like he had to be cut out of record, because it's like his testimony couldn't be used because which is weird, because I feel like his testimony was already added into as evidence. So it's like, why? I guess because he can't. Because it's kind of like, I guess because of the circumstances around his death, because he killed himself, quote unquote, killed himself, it's a situation where it's like, I guess that means you can't take what he said literally, because it was like his death word. So it's like, maybe he said all that because he knew he was going to kill himself later on. So maybe that's why. That's the only way I can see it. But Bull was 100% like, oh no, like, Andrew somehow, some way killed him, which that never came up in the episode. There's no like whole lengthy thing about charging him or whatever. So I can only assume maybe that's going to be something that comes up in the future. But for now, it's like it never came up as like, oh, we have this evidence proving it, because there's no evidence, because everything's showing that like Sean did. So we're not even 100% sure whether Sean really did or not. But I do trust Bull's judgment, especially because you had the whole situation with Diana, because it was like he brought her, like there was a point where he contacted her. Basically they met at the bottom of Bull's building, and then she got in the car with him and everything. Obviously there's little moments like you can see him touching her, like when she's getting into the car, like touching her back almost. And then he almost looks at the camera knowing that Bull would be watching, because Bull brought it up before. Like he had come across Andrew before. It's like they never really met face to face when it came to buying the building. But basically there was an auction for something. I forgot what it was. But basically they kept going back and forth because of something Bull really wanted. But Andrew kept paying, obviously Bull kept raising the price just to see if Andrew would pay for it. And he did. Bull did it more so than he kept raising the price just to spite him. But he ended up paying for it. But then he ended up giving it to Bull basically with a note saying like, honestly, I didn't want it. I just, for him, it's all about winning. So Bull sees that, and he's like, he sees this whole situation with Diana. It's because he knows that there's a past between, because obviously he's done his own research. So, hence why he brought Diana in. But he knows there's something there. He can possibly read it. Because his whole thing is the fact is he's trying to pretend like he has empathy, and that's him mimicking it. So he probably looks at them and then is able to see, obviously, oh, these are the signs of something being there. So basically he did that just to antagonize Bull. So, but there was a moment, even like Diana's like coming over and handing over some stuff, and he's like, the reason why you're bringing this over because you believe, like you can sit here and deny it, but you know deep down that he is a sociopath, that he is a killer. Whether not necessarily about the whole Sean thing, which is partly what he's alluding to, but also about those 15 people that he just went ahead and killed them, that he could have done something. He purposely didn't do anything because he doesn't care, which we'll kind of get to in a second. But it's because the fact is, Diana's very smart, so she kind of picked up on it too. But the fact is, she still has a job to do. She was hired to be his defense lawyer, and she has to do her job. It's because she could. I think you can actually get in trouble. I mean, it ends up being something later on. He talks about the fact is that they're colluding together, which they didn't really do that. She gave him the best defense she could. It's not her fault that he was outright guilty, and Bull found out all this information. Like I said, I'll get to that in a second. But even she was kind of like, she didn't want to especially because she knows that he is kind of a killer, that he is a sociopath. Like, she starts seeing the signs herself. At first, she just kind of didn't want to admit it because it'd make it harder, because it's like representing someone that you know is downright guilty. It's like, it shows you, obviously she's very schemy and everything when it comes to being a lawyer and everything. But even she, it's like, yeah, there's right and there's wrong. And in the circumstances, he's outright wrong. But like I said, she still had to give him the best defense possible. Because basically, Bull's like, basically, she came over there because she wanted him to convince her that it's like, oh, he's not a killer. He's like, I wish I could tell you that, but I can't. He is a sociopath. But they ended up finding out basically through some hidden texts and stuff like that, that basically, Cable ended up finding out that basically he talked with someone who basically, there's basically an algorithm that basically, it was cost risk situation, that basically, would it cost more to fix the problems, halt the creation of this sky bridge, or would it cost more if there was anything to happen? And basically broke everything down, like, the amount of people, like that, basically from the equation, that it would actually cost less money if something were to possibly happen in the future, compared to like maybe the billion it would take to halt the project, or and plus the materials and everything. So basically, it even broke it down. It's like, this person is worth this much. A doctor is worth more than a plumber, and so on and so forth. Just basically putting a value to someone's life. So basically being like, there's a lot more. That's its whole thing. So I am very curious. The way the case did end off, I do wonder, is it going to be something that's dealt with off camera, or is it something that is going to pop up later on in the story? I don't think we've ever revisited a case like that, because most cases are kind of wrapped up in their own situation. But this is also a very interesting time, because it doesn't happen often, because more often than not, Bull and them are on the side of like, hey, we're on the defense side of things. So it's very interesting when you see them on the prosecution side, which isn't saying this is the first time it's ever happened. It's happened before, but it's kind of interesting when you see that happen, especially in this case, because I was thinking like, we're going to find out there's a lot more to it, that this Andrew guy's not actually a bad guy. It's like, no. It's like, no, he's straight up a bad guy. He's 100% at fault. He did this on purpose just because he figured he can save money. It'd be cheaper to let people die than spend a lot of money to fix this situation and make it so that it's safe for people. So obviously there's the whole Lindsay and Bull thing, so I'm very curious to see where that goes. I like the fact is that she dropped her accent for this, just to kind of fit more into the city, kind of losing her Texan accent, kind of make it, even bring it up as kind of a thing as part of her tactics of kind of fitting in and kind of be like, I'm not here for games, I'm here to do my job type of situation. So, but another thing that came up in this episode dealt with Benny, because Benny talked to what's his name, Olsen, the assistant attorney, whatever the case may be, talked to him about it, about basically getting that. Was that last episode he ended up getting out, or was that the episode before last? I think that was last episode, about that that basically he was being investigated by the attorney office, and he was trying to figure it out. But Olsen kind of was like, hey, I looked into the file, and I, because he had heard Benny's name and the way he was rapping, I was like, okay, is it because you heard about Benny getting kicked out, like kind of quote unquote fired? Is it connected to that? But it's like, no, it's connected to this, because he had previously heard Benny's name, probably amongst whispers in the attorney office, about like going after him. And it turned, because I started wondering too, I was like, why would it go after Benny? It's like, could it necessarily what went down last episode, him not keeping his mouth shut? It's like, no, there's more to it. Apparently it deals with a case he dealt with 8 years ago. I think the dude's name is Aiden. It's like a murder case. And now I'm thinking like this is connected, because I was starting to think about it during the episode. I'm like, that's the only case of Benny's that we're really aware of, at least that we like, the most noticeable one that they've really brought up is the case dealing with the case that made him decide to quit being a prosecutor. Is because there was a man he 100% believed was innocent, that basically was everyone was kind of pushing him to be like, no, the guy's guilty, and he felt it inside of him that the guy was innocent. So I'm thinking this might be connected to that. It has to be. I mean, really, we'll have to wait to see, but that's the only thing I can, not unless there's something else to this, because like I said, but nothing else from Benny's past has ever come up except for that, because that's the main reason why he quit. Obviously his ex will bring up the fact that, when his ex came up in a episode basically being about the fact is that he got fired, not quit. Was because of that particular case, because it was all about, for him, it was all about winning and not really, doing the best job he could at like sending people to jail. But this is a person he wholeheartedly believes like, no, he was innocent. So kind of one of the reasons why he likes working with Bull, I'm sure. But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. But not unless this is something else, kind of a darker part of Benny's past that we're delving into. Like I said, we've gone a little bit of everyone's past. The only person, I mean, even Cable, we've delved into a little bit. So, but Benny's we definitely did, obviously with connected with his sister as well as with his ex. And now it's like we're delving into it a little bit more. I mean, I would assume that his ex might come up because, that's kind of how they met each other during those days. Obviously, they made, like, the last time she was in an episode, like, kind of made it seem like, oh, there might be something like a rekindling of the relationship. Because, I think it was Bull or someone else kind of pointed out the fact is that there was still some feelings between them. So maybe that'll come up in the next episode. Maybe she'll play a big part in it, like, And the question is, I'm wondering is, will Benny tell the others? Because he's yet to tell anybody about this because he's still keeping it hush hush. Because I guess for him, it's like, they're coming after me, not Tact. And the last thing he wants to do is drag his friends and coworkers into all of this, because it's like, it's my problem. I deal with it. This doesn't have anything to do with them. So it might be kind of a, it's probably a combination of concern as well as a sense of pride of like, oh, not wanting to rely on anyone. If it's his problem, he has to fix himself. But like I said, we'll just kind of have to wait to see what that turns out to be. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.